Marcus Thompson stood in the quiet hospital break room, his blue maintenance uniform still damp from mopping the emergency wing. At 32, he carried the broad shoulders and easy strength of a man who might once have played college football, someone who knew what discipline felt like, but had learned humility the hard way. His calloused hands gripped the mop bucket handle as he paused in the doorway, eyes drawn to the woman sitting at the table near the window. Eleanor Grace was there, as always, her silver-gray hair pulled neatly into a bun that shimmered under the fluorescent light. The color, striking against her youthful face, was a genetic quirk she wore with quiet dignity. At 28, she had an air of calm capability that made patients trust her instantly. Tonight the city lights twinkled behind her like scattered stars as she flipped through patient charts, a half-finished cup of coffee cooling beside her. She looked serene, focused, professional, but Marcus knew better. He had watched her stay past every shift, comforting those who had no family, bringing extra sandwiches to the break room fridge, so the night staff wouldn't go hungry. He admired her more than he'd ever admit. For 6 months Marcus had worked evening shifts at Mercy General, keeping floors shining while chasing his engineering degree during the day. 2 years left, if he could hold everything together, tuition, rent, the constant tide of bills. But what kept him grounded were these brief moments on Tuesdays and Thursdays when their paths crossed. A shared smile, a quiet word. Tonight, though, his heart thudded for another reason. The hospital's annual charity gala was coming up. He'd overheard a group of nurses teasing Eleanor about not having a date, joking that she'd probably spend the night reorganizing charts. They didn't see her the way he did. They didn't notice how she stopped to chat with the janitors, or how she once bought coffee for the entire cleaning crew after a rough night shift. Marcus had saved for weeks, tucking away every spare dollar until he could afford 2 tickets, $300 each. A ridiculous sum for him, but worth every cent if it meant seeing her smile outside the sterile walls of the hospital. He took a deep breath, wiped his palms on his uniform, and stepped inside. Eleanor looked up, her expression softening into that gentle smile that always made his chest tighten. "Long shift, Marcus?" she asked, setting her pen down. "The usual," he said, trying to sound casual. "Though I've been meaning to ask you something." Her brows lifted curiously. The fluorescent lights caught the faint blue undertones in her silver hair, giving it a halo-like glow. Marcus swallowed hard. "The hospital gala's next Friday. I was wondering if you'd like to go with me." The silence stretched long enough for him to regret every word. Then Eleanor's lips parted in surprise before curving into a soft, uncertain smile. "Marcus," she said quietly, "are you sure? The tickets aren't cheap." He nodded. "I saved up. And I should warn you, my dancing peaked at my high school prom back in 2010. Her laughter filled the small room like music, warm and unguarded. Then we'll be perfectly matched in our mediocrity, because mine peaked the same year. So is that a yes?" "It's absolutely a yes." The week that followed moved like a dream Marcus didn't want to wake from. He rented a tuxedo, slightly too tight in the shoulders, and practiced rusty dance steps in the reflection of his small apartment window. Between classes and night shifts, he caught himself wondering if Eleanor might change her mind. She didn't. On Friday evening, he drove to her modest apartment, palms sweating as he waited outside. When the door opened, words failed him. Eleanor stood framed in soft hallway light, wearing a navy blue gown that fit her like it had been made for her. Her hair was pinned elegantly, her silver strands gleaming like moonlight against dark fabric. "You clean up nice, Mr. Thompson," she teased, looping her arm through his. "And you," he managed, "look beautiful, though you always do." Her cheeks flushed. "Careful, you'll make me believe you." They arrived at the grand ballroom downtown, where crystal chandeliers bathed marble floors in golden light. The place smelled of roses, champagne, and polished ambition. Doctors, donors, and board members filled the room, their laughter mingling with the string quartet. Marcus felt eyes turned toward them. Whispers followed, some curious, some condescending, but Eleanor didn't seem to notice. She smiled at him instead, a silent reassurance that none of it mattered. "Relax," she murmured. "We belong here." They danced to songs that carried a nostalgia neither could explain, laughing when they stepped on each other's feet. For the first time in years, Marcus forgot the weight of bills and expectations. He was just a man holding a woman he admired. During a slow song, Eleanor rested her head lightly against his shoulder. "There's something I should tell you," she whispered. He looked down at her, puzzled. "About who I am," she continued softly. "I know who you are," he said with an easy smile. "You're the nurse who stays 3 hours late to hold a patient's hand. The one who knows the name of every janitor, every patient, every intern." She gave a small, nervous laugh. "That's not what I mean." Pulling back slightly, she met his eyes. "My father is Richard Grace." Marcus froze. Everyone in the hospital knew that name. Richard Grace, the CEO of Grace Medical Industries, the company that supplied equipment to hospitals across the country. The same name etched in gold on the new cardiac care wing at Mercy General. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked after a long pause. "Because I want to be seen for my work, not my last name," she said quietly. "My father wanted me in the boardroom, not in scrubs. But this is where I belong." She looked up at him, eyes uncertain. "Does it change how you see me?" Marcus studied her face, the vulnerability there, the quiet strength, and smiled. "The only thing it changes is that now I understand why you look a little sad when people talk about struggling with money. You feel guilty for having what others need." Her breath caught. "Most people either resent me for it or try to use it. You're the first who understands." "I don't want you for your name, Eleanor," he said gently. "I like you for your terrible dancing and your habit of stealing my fries on break." Her laughter came out choked, half tears, half joy. Then his voice softened. "But you should know something, too. I'm not going to be a janitor forever. I'm 2 years from my engineering degree. Still, even if I was, I'd never be ashamed of honest work." "I know," she said, eyes shining. "I've seen your textbooks in your locker. Advanced thermodynamics isn't exactly light reading." They smiled, the music wrapping around them like a promise. In that moment, the titles of nurse and janitor, rich and poor, melted away. There were only 2 people, dancing, laughing, seeing each other clearly. When the final song ended, Eleanor's hand lingered in his. "Thank you, Marcus," she whispered, "for reminding me who I want to be." He smiled. "And thank you for saying yes." They didn't know it then, but that night would mark the start of everything that came next. The quiet love that would defy expectations, heal old wounds, and prove that dignity isn't measured by a paycheck, but by the way a person treats others. 6 months later, Marcus would walk across a stage in a crisp graduation gown, and Eleanor Grace would be in the front row cheering louder than anyone. But that part of the story, how the janitor became an engineer, how the nurse's secret lineage became irrelevant in the light of real love, was still waiting to unfold. The weeks after the gala were unlike anything either of them had experienced. Word spread quickly through Mercy General, whispers of the janitor and the nurse who arrived together at the gala. Some mocked quietly, others were simply surprised. Yet Marcus and Eleanor carried on as if none of it mattered. Their connection only deepened. They had shared something real that night, not a fairy tale, but the kind of bond that grows from mutual respect. Eleanor still left extra sandwiches in the break room fridge. Marcus still worked his evening shifts, pushing his mop cart through the quiet hallways after visiting hours. But now, when their eyes met in the corridors, there was something unspoken between them. A promise, a quiet understanding that what they had wasn't fragile. Still, not everyone was supportive. A few senior nurses whispered that Eleanor had made a charity project out of Marcus. Others assumed Marcus was chasing a life he couldn't afford. He ignored them all. He knew who he was. Every night, when he went home to his small apartment and a stack of engineering textbooks, he reminded himself that his worth wasn't tied to his uniform. It came from his work, his heart, and the woman who believed in both. Then, one evening, Eleanor's father came to the hospital unexpectedly. Richard Grace, the CEO whose name shone in silver on the hospital's cardiac wing plaque. Marcus had only ever seen him in magazines, sharp suits, colder eyes, the kind of man whose handshakes seal billion-dollar deals. Now he stood in the nurse's station, speaking quietly with his daughter. Eleanor's shoulders were tense, her lips pressed tight. Marcus paused nearby, pretending to mop, but listening nonetheless. "Eleanor, you can't be serious," Richard said, his tone sharp but low. "A janitor? You're a Grace. You could have anyone you want. Why throw your life away on someone kind, genuine, hard-working?" she interrupted, her voice steady. "Someone who doesn't care about my last name? You raised me to respect people who build their lives from the ground up, didn't you, Dad?" Richard's expression softened for a moment, but his pride returned quickly. "Respect, yes. But marriage? You're making a mistake." "I've made my decision," she said firmly. Richard glanced toward Marcus, who had straightened his shoulders and met his gaze without flinching. That silent exchange spoke volumes. Two men, worlds apart, yet bound by their love for the same woman. For months afterward, things were strained. Eleanor and Marcus saw each other quietly, their moments together stolen between shifts and study sessions. They shared late-night coffee in the break room, lunches in the courtyard, and quiet walks home after long days. Marcus kept working, saving, studying. Eleanor kept believing in him. When graduation day came, Marcus stood on stage in his cap and gown, his heart pounding as his name was called. Marcus Thompson, Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering with honors. From a front row, Eleanor's cheer cut through the crowd. Her silver hair gleamed under the lights as she clapped and called his name. And just behind her, Richard Gray stood, stiff at first, then nodding once, slow but genuine. After the ceremony, he approached Marcus. "You proved me wrong," Richard said quietly. Marcus smiled. "I wasn't trying to prove anything, sir. Just doing my best." Richard studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Take care of my daughter." "I already do," Marcus replied. That summer, Marcus proposed in the same hospital courtyard where they'd shared countless lunches. He carved the words, "For the one who saw me," inside the small wooden box that held the ring. Eleanor said yes before he could even finish the question. Their wedding was small, held in the hospital chapel, decorated with white lilies and strings of soft light. The staff came, doctors, nurses, janitors, and even the cafeteria crew. The vows were simple but powerful. Eleanor's father, now teary-eyed, walked her down the aisle and placed her hand in Marcus's with quiet pride. "I thought I was giving my daughter away," he whispered to Marcus, "but I see now she found someone who walked beside her." When the ceremony ended, the applause filled the chapel. Marcus and Eleanor's first dance wasn't perfect. He stepped on her gown twice, and she laughed so hard she almost lost her balance. But it didn't matter. In that moment, surrounded by the people who had seen their journey unfold, they were proof that love doesn't need to look perfect to be true. Years later, life had changed in ways neither of them could have imagined. Marcus became a senior engineer, leading projects that improved hospital infrastructure across the state. Eleanor opened free community clinics in underprivileged neighborhoods, naming the first one Grace and Thompson Wellness Center. They worked side by side, one designing systems that saved lives, the other caring for the lives those systems protected. At night, in their cozy home overlooking the city lights, they would still dance, barefoot, to the same songs from the galley years ago. Sometimes their daughter would peek from the hallway and giggle, "Mom, Dad, you're terrible dancers," and they'd laugh, knowing she was right. But to them, those dances weren't about rhythm. They were about memory of a break room, a mop bucket, and a moment when one person chose to see another for who they truly were. When asked years later how they met, Marcus would always smile and say, "I was just cleaning floors. She was cleaning hearts." And Eleanor would add softly, "He asked me to dance when no one else thought he should." That's all love really is, choosing to see someone's worth before the world does. Because at the heart of their story was a truth that echoed through time. Real love doesn't see status. It sees soul. Sometimes the greatest romance begins not at fancy galas or luxury mansions, but in a quiet hospital break room between a janitor with big dreams and a nurse with a kind heart. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes that kindness still matters, that the truest love stories are the ones written not by wealth or fame, but by courage, compassion, and the willingness to look beyond the uniform.